Welcome back, night crawlers, to Nakora Nights, Manitoba, where silence stretches for miles and small towns sit buried under snow and secrets. Places where everybody knows your name and everybody knows when you don't belong. At night, the cold isn't the only thing that creeps in. The darkness feels heavier, the streets feel watched. And sometimes, footsteps follow you in fresh snow, without anyone behind them. Tonight, we uncover 10 true Manitoba small-town horror stories, real encounters from frozen roads, abandoned houses, and towns the world forgot, lights turning on inside empty homes, radios picking up voices from closed police stations, and knocking on doors that stops the moment you reach the handle. These aren't legends. These are stories from people who lived there and barely slept again. Before we step into the cold, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because some towns feel very different after dark. If you're brave enough to walk these frozen streets, hit like, subscribe, and comment below, I survived the cold. Now, turn down the lights, wrap yourself tight, and listen closely. Because in small towns like this, the quiet is louder than any scream. This is 10 Untold Most Disturbing True Manitoba Small Town Horror Stories. Let's begin. I never believed cold could whisper until that winter night in Winnipeg. The kind of night where the air freezes your breath mid-sentence and the world feels like it's holding something back. Before everything changed, I was just a guy named Nathan Cole. I used to work night shifts at a small convenience store on Portage Avenue, saving up to go back to college. I'd been in Winnipeg for 2 months. New city, new start, or at least that's what my mother had called it when I left Calgary after a messy breakup and a job I couldn't stand. But I've learned that sometimes a new start doesn't mean a clean one. It just means you're running from ghosts that learn how to follow. That night started like any other: dim lights, empty streets, and the sound of snow hitting glass. It was close to 11:30 p.m., and the last bus had just passed. I locked up the store, zipped my jacket, and stepped into the cutting wind. The street was nearly deserted except for the dull glow of a traffic light blinking red and green through falling snow. My car was parked across the road, and all I wanted was to get home, heat up leftover soup, and forget another silent day. But the city felt wrong that night. As I started the car and pulled onto Portage, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Winnipeg's roads at night always felt lonelier than they should, but after 3 turns, the same car was still there. Then another appeared ahead, slowing down just enough to make my skin crawl. The road narrowed, boxed in by 2 snowbanks, and suddenly I realized, 1 car in front, 1 behind. They weren't passing, they were closing in. My fingers tightened on the wheel. The back car's high beams flooded my rearview mirror, burning into my eyes. The front one slowed even more, forcing me to crawl at a walking pace. I slammed the brakes and jerked into a side street, snow flying. For a second, I thought I'd lost them, but when I looked in the mirror, the headlights turned the same corner. My heart hammered. I didn't wait. I cut across the next intersection and shot into a side alley, fishtailing on the ice. I parked behind a dumpster, killed the lights, and sat in silence, the sound of my pulse louder than the wind. A few seconds later, both cars rolled by the mouth of the alley, slow, deliberate, like hunters checking every shadow. I didn't breathe until they vanished. It was 1:12 a.m. when I finally reached my apartment on Graham Avenue, my hands still shaking. I climbed the old wooden stairs to my second-floor unit, the kind of place where heat only worked if you hit the radiator twice. I kicked off my boots, hung my jacket, and tried to laugh it off. Maybe drunk drivers, maybe a coincidence. But deep down, something gnawed at me, an old, familiar sense that I wasn't safe anymore. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I turned on the kitchen light, and that's when I saw it, wet footprints leading from my door toward the hallway. Big, heavy ones, pressed deep into melted snow. My door had been locked. I always locked it. Every nerve in me went still. The print stopped halfway to my bedroom, like whoever it was had vanished. I stood frozen, trying to listen, but the only sound was the hum of the fridge. I grabbed the closest thing I could, a rusted wrench from under the sink, and pushed the bedroom door open. Empty. But the window was open, snow drifting through the crack, the curtain swaying like something had just left. I closed it, heart pounding, and sat on the edge of the bed. There was no one there, but the footprints. God, they were real. I followed them back to the door, trying to make sense of it, until my eyes caught something carved into the wood near the lock. Don't trust the tracks. My stomach dropped. That night, I barely slept. Every sound, the radiator clicking, the pipes groaning, felt alive. I told myself I'd call the landlord, maybe the police, but by morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. That's how fear works. It gaslights you until you stop trusting your own eyes. I went to work like normal. My coworker, an older man named Paul, was half asleep behind the counter when I told him about the cars and the footprints. He laughed, said maybe I'd watched too many thrillers. "Winnipeg's weird at night, man," he said. "You'll get used to it." But that week, things only got worse. One evening, while I was stocking shelves, the local bus driver came in. He was pale, sweating under his uniform, muttering to himself. I handed him coffee, and he whispered, "You ever feel watched on your route?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He leaned in, voice shaking. 3 nights now, same white van follows my bus, parked near the stops where kids wait in the morning. Never gets out, just idles. Always disappears before I can get close. I tried to laugh it off, but when he looked at me, his eyes were hollow. "It's not a coincidence," he said. "You remember the old railroad tracks east of town? Same van's been there too." Something twisted in my gut. The tracks. That night, I took the long way home. The streets were slick, glistening with frost. As I turned onto a narrow bridge crossing the frozen river, I saw movement. Someone standing near the guardrail, motionless, wearing a hood. I slowed down, squinting through the snow. For a second, the person turned, and even through the fogged windshield, I could see their eyes, wide, dark, and fixed on me. Then they were gone. I reached my apartment around 2:17 a.m. and rushed upstairs, bolting the door. My hands were trembling so bad I dropped my keys twice. I tried calling Paul, but no answer. The city felt empty, swallowed by snow and silence. I sat by the window watching the street below. Then I saw it, the same white van idling across the street. No lights, no movement. I stayed up all night. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. People started whispering about disappearances, a boy near the river, a woman who never made it home from work. The news said nothing, but the rumors spread. They said someone was taking people near the old railroad bridge, the one covered in ice and rust, where no one went anymore. One night, after another long shift, I saw a shadow in the store's reflection, not behind me, inside the glass itself. Like someone was staring back through it. When I turned, there was no one there. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave Winnipeg. But first, I wanted to see the tracks for myself. Maybe it was guilt, maybe curiosity, but something in me needed to know. It was just after 7:45 p.m. when I drove out past the edge of the city. Snow blanketed everything, the headlights slicing through mist. The old bridge came into view, twisted metal, splintered planks, half buried under drifts. I parked and stepped out. The air was dead still. My breath hung like smoke. Footprints. Fresh ones, leading across the bridge toward the other side. I followed, each step creaking beneath me, the river below frozen in jagged shards. Halfway across, I heard a sound, soft, dragging, like someone walking barefoot on wood. I spun around, nothing. Then I saw it. At the far end of the bridge, a figure stood tall, shoulders bent, face hidden under a hood. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then it lifted its head. Its face was pale, like wax, with hollow eyes that reflected no light. Its mouth hung open, and I swear I heard something whisper from it. Not words, but a sound like the wind through broken glass. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on ice. The thing started moving toward me, slow at first, then faster, arms twitching unnaturally. I ran. By the time I reached the car, I could still hear it, those dragging steps on wood echoing behind me. I slammed the door, started the engine, and tore down the road, snow spinning in blinding flurries. I didn't stop until I reached downtown lights again. When I got home, I found something waiting. On my door, another carving, deeper this time. You were supposed to fall. I lost it. I packed what I could and drove straight out of the city before dawn. But no matter how far I went, I kept seeing things in the corners of my vision. Wet footprints, fogged glass, headlights, and mirrors that disappeared when I blinked. Weeks later, I saw a story online. Local man found dead near the tracks, cause unknown. The picture showed Paul. The police called it an accident. I knew better. Sometimes, I dream of that bridge, of something standing there, waiting. And every winter night in Manitoba, when the snow starts falling and the city grows too quiet, I swear I can hear dragging footsteps in the hall, stopping just outside my door. I never thought a quiet winter town could eat away at your sanity the way a city never could. When I lived in Toronto, before the snow and the silence swallowed me, noise was life. The clatter of subways, the endless horns, even the sound of footsteps above our apartment. It all made me feel alive. My wife Mira and I were young then, both in college, sharing cheap takeout, dreaming too loud for our small space. I never imagined I'd end up in Brandon, Manitoba, a place where winter feels older than time and silence doesn't rest. It listens. Mira always dreamed of peace, of snow that muffles everything. I only dreamed of her. So peace came with the package. After nearly a decade in the city, we thought it was time to raise our son somewhere quieter. Rent was killing us, space was a joke, and Toronto didn't feel built for families anymore. I still remember the day I decided we were done. It was late November, the streets slick with rain that would soon turn to sleet, and our son Noah, barely 8, almost got hit by a cyclist dodging a taxi. I watched him stumble on the sidewalk, and something inside me broke. So we packed our life into boxes, drove west for hours, and found Brandon, a place with one grocery store, 2 diners, and a winter so deep you could almost hear it breathing. At first, it felt like a new beginning. A small rental house with a porch facing a frozen street, kind neighbors who waved too much, and air so cold it burned your lungs. Mira loved it, Noah didn't. The stillness bothered him. Nights were too quiet, streets too empty. He used to tell me the snow felt like it was hiding things. I told him that was just his imagination, but even then, I felt something uneasy in the way the wind moved around our house, whispering against the windows as if trying to get in. By our second winter, Mira gave birth to our daughter, Isla. She came screaming into the world like she already knew the cold waiting for her. Noah was 10 by then, a quiet kid with sharp eyes and too much imagination for a town with nothing to do. When school was canceled for snow days, he'd stay inside, building stories about explorers lost in ice storms or strange people living under the frozen river. I didn't think much of it until he met a boy named Mason. Mason was the kind of kid who could make a snow pile feel like an adventure. He was loud, funny, full of strange ideas. Noah adored him. They became inseparable that winter, sledding, skating, and building forts behind the woods that edged our neighborhood. For the first time since we moved, Noah laughed again. Every afternoon, Mason would call. Sometimes, I'd hear him through the cordless phone, speaking in a rush of excitement. Once, I heard him say something that stuck with me. "There's someone down by the river," he told Noah, his voice just loud enough for me to catch. "He's giving away silver coins if we help him find his lost things." At first, I laughed it off. Kids make things up. But then Noah came to me the next day wearing that hopeful smile that only kids have before the world teaches them better. "Dad," Mason says, "there's a man by the river again. He wants us to help him. Says he'll tell us a story if we do." Something about the way he said it, the pause before man, made my stomach twist. Their games had always been about imaginary things. Space pirates, ice giants, shadow wolves. Never people. Never real. I asked if Mason was joking, and Noah just shrugged. "Probably," he said, but he didn't sound sure. The next afternoon, while Mira fed the baby upstairs, the phone rang. It was Mason again. I could hear him faintly through the receiver as Noah talked, his voice hurried, full of energy. "He's there now," Mason said. "Come quick," he said, "tonight's special." Something cold slid through me. I told Noah I'd come with him. pretending it was just for fresh air. He didn't argue, just pulled on his gloves and boots, eyes glowing with excitement. The river was only a short walk away, behind a line of trees that stood like black teeth in the snow. The wind was sharp enough to sting. We reached the riverbank. The ice stretched out, white and endless, cracking faintly beneath the weight of the cold. But there was no one there, no Mason. No footprints, only the sound of the frozen water groaning under the wind. Noah frowned, kicking at the snow. He said he'd be here. I scanned the dark tree line. Maybe he went home, he shook his head. Mason's never late. That sentence, it was the way he said it, quiet and certain, that made my heart pound. I told him we'd wait a bit. We stood there as the light faded, the sky turning deep blue and the first stars flickered above the frozen world. But Mason never came. After 10 minutes, I told Noah we were heading home. He hesitated, glancing back at the river. "Dad, do you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing. Then, faintly under the wind came a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the ice. I froze. "Probably just branches," I said, forcing calm. But I didn't believe it. The sound came again, closer this time, then stopped. Silence pressed down hard, heavy, and absolute. Noah moved closer to me. I could feel him shaking through his coat. We hurried home through the woods, the dark closing in around us. By the time we reached the street, my fingers were numb and the stars looked like holes punched through black paper. When we got inside, I called Mason's mother, Lena. Her voice was tight when she answered. "No, Mason's not here," she said quickly. "He left about 20 minutes ago. Said he was going to meet Noah at your place." The words froze me. "He never came here," I said. We were at the river. There was a pause, then a sound like something breaking in her throat. "The river," she whispered. "He told me he was staying near the woods." We hung up. I told Mira I had to go out again. Noah begged to come, but I told him to stay. I grabbed a flashlight and drove toward the river, my headlights cutting through the snow. The road was empty, not even tire marks. When I reached the riverbank again, the wind had died, and the silence was worse than before. I walked toward the edge, my breath a cloud in the beam of my light. The snow was uneven now, as if someone or something had struggled there. Then I saw it. A red glove half buried in the drift, Mason's. His mother had knitted those gloves herself. I picked it up with shaking hands. Near the glove, the ice was cracked. Thin lines spread outward like a spider's web. I shouted his name, my voice echoing off the trees. No answer. Only the sound of the ice groaning, deep and low, like something alive beneath it. The police came after Lena called them. They searched for hours, through the woods, along the frozen water, even downriver with spotlights. Nothing. Not a trace. Only the glove, found near a hole in the ice. They said maybe he fell through, maybe the current carried him. But no one could explain the lack of footprints leading to that hole. None. Brandon changed after that night. People stopped letting their kids walk alone. The diner closed early. The laughter that once floated over the snow disappeared. The town went silent in a way that felt wrong, like the quiet was hiding something. Noah couldn't sleep for weeks. He'd wake up screaming, saying he heard scraping under his window. Sometimes he said the man from the river was calling his name. I'd tell him it was just a dream, but every time he said it, I felt my own heart start to believe him. We moved away the next year. Mira said she couldn't stand the winters anymore, but I think she just couldn't stand the sound of the wind around that house. Noah never got better, not really. He stopped going near water, stopped laughing, stopped being a child. Years later, I went back to Brandon for work. I drove past the river one evening, just as the light faded. The ice was forming again, smooth and glassy. And in the distance, near the bend where the trees leaned over the water, I saw something move. A figure. Small, wearing a red glove. I blinked, and it was gone. The hotel I stayed in that night was near the edge of town, an old brick place that creaked with every gust of wind. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound, faint but distinct. A dragging noise in the hallway, slow and heavy, moving past my door. I sat up, heart pounding. The hall was supposed to be empty, no other guests on my floor. I listened. The sound stopped right outside my room. Then 3 soft knocks. I couldn't move. The air felt thick, frozen in my lungs. After a few seconds, the knocking stopped, replaced by a whisper that slid under the door. "Come help me find my things." My body went cold. It was the same line Mason had said before he vanished. I didn't open the door. I didn't move until morning. When I finally looked outside, there were wet footprints leading from my door toward the stairs, bare, small, and melting into the carpet. I checked out without breakfast. Mira never believed me when I told her. Noah just looked at me quietly, then said he's still looking for someone to play with. Now, every time it snows, I hear the scraping again. Not loud, just under the wind, like something dragging itself across ice, slow and patient. And sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, I think I hear footsteps in the hallway. I tell myself it's just the pipes, the house settling, the winter wind. But deep down, I know the silence isn't empty. It's waiting. I never thought winter could whisper my name. That's how it began, one quiet night when the wind outside sounded like someone calling for help. I moved to Thompson, Manitoba in the middle of January. People said it was madness to start over in the north during the coldest month of the year, but madness was already living inside me. I just didn't want to admit it. My name is Noah Ray, 34, once a small-town mechanic from Dry Hollow, a place where everyone knew when your headlights burned out. I came north after my mother passed away, thinking the freezing air could numb everything inside me that still remembered her hospital room. When I rented the little ground-floor apartment on Birchview Road, I thought I'd finally found quiet. The building looked old but strong, 2 stories of red brick half buried in snow. Upstairs lived the man I never met, Mr. Halden, my landlord said, a quiet one, pays on time, keeps to himself. Those words sounded fine to me. I didn't need friends, just peace. The night I moved in, the temperature dropped to -30. The sky was pale as bone, the snow so thick the street lights looked like halos. My friend Mara, who'd driven me up from Winnipeg, clapped her gloves and said, "This place looks like something out of a horror movie." I laughed then. I shouldn't have. The first week passed in silence. Total silence. No footsteps upstairs, no water running, no voices. Sometimes I thought maybe the upstairs apartment was empty, but I saw light through the cracks of his blinds at night, pale and flickering like a candle. I told myself, some people just live quiet. I had no reason to think more about it. Then, one night around 1:20 a.m., I saw something that froze my heart colder than the air outside. I had gone to take out the trash. The sky was dark blue, the kind of color that feels too heavy to breathe. As I stepped into the alley behind the building, I saw her. A small barefoot child standing in the middle of the snowy road, white nightgown fluttering, skin pale as frost. Her head was tilted down, her long dark hair covering her face. For a second I just stared, too shocked to move. Then I blinked and she was gone. No footprints in the snow, just wind. I told myself it was the cold playing tricks. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my mind wanted to see ghosts where there were none, but that night I barely slept. A few nights later, around 2:17 a.m., I woke to a scratching sound at my back door. Not like the wind. It was steady, desperate. Scratch, pause, scratch again. I sat up, my breath fogging in the air because the heater was failing again. The sound moved to the small kitchen window. I crept closer, heart pounding, and saw handprints frozen into the glass. Tiny, pale handprints that melted as I watched. The next morning, the yard was covered in a new layer of snow. But near the trash bins, I saw footprints, bare feet. Small, like a child's. I called Mara that day, told her I was hearing things, seeing things. She laughed nervously and said, "You always were jumpy, Noah." But she promised to come up next weekend and stay a few nights, just to keep me company. That made me feel better for a while. On Friday night, Mara arrived just before 7:45 p.m., her car covered in ice. We ordered pizza, drank beer, watched a movie. It felt normal, almost like the old days. Around 11, we heard something upstairs. A single heavy footstep, then another. Finally, I whispered, "Guess he's home." Mara turned the volume down. Another step. Then something dragged across the floor, slow and scraping, like furniture being moved or something being pulled. The sound stopped above my bed. Mara looked at me, her eyes wide. "That's creepy. Maybe he's shifting boxes," I said, trying to sound casual. At midnight, we heard the faint thud of a door closing upstairs. Then, nothing. The next morning, we went out for coffee. As we stepped into the freezing air, Mara frowned. "Do you smell that?" It was faint but strange, like metal mixed with something burned. The air seemed heavier around the building. When we came back, Mara pointed at the upstairs window. "Look," she said. The blinds were half open. Someone was standing there. I glanced up, but by the time I looked, the blinds had dropped. That night, Mara insisted on sleeping on the couch. I didn't argue. I tried to stay awake, scrolling through my phone, reading news about northern storms, anything to drown out the silence. Then, at 3:02 a.m., I heard it again, the scratching. Not on the door this time, on the ceiling. It went on for 10 minutes. When I finally got the nerve to knock on the ceiling with a broom handle, it stopped. Dead quiet. Then, faintly, a low whistle came from outside the front window. Just a slow, eerie tune, 4 notes, repeating. The next morning, Mara was gone. Her bag still on the couch, her boots missing, the front door unlocked. Her car gone from the driveway. My first thought was she'd driven into town early. But when I called her, her phone went straight to voicemail. Hours later, police found her car on the old logging road near Paint Lake, engine running, doors open, no footprints leading away. They searched for days but found nothing. After that, I couldn't eat. Couldn't think, couldn't breathe without feeling watched. The upstairs lights kept flickering every night at the same time. Once, I heard soft laughter from above, too quiet to be real but too clear to ignore. One night, I finally decided to confront him. "Mr. Halden." I climbed the icy stairs, the railing rough beneath my gloves. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I tried the handle. It was locked, but I thought I heard movement inside, a faint creak, then silence. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw something at the edge of the hallway floor, a cigarette butt, still smoking faintly. There were more, maybe 5 or 6, forming a rough circle near the top of the stairs. But I hadn't heard a lighter, hadn't smelled smoke before. I backed away, heart hammering. That night, I didn't sleep. Around dawn, I heard loud banging outside. I looked through the curtain and saw men in black uniforms surrounding the building. They moved quietly, quickly, snow crunching under their boots. One of them raised a hand and pointed toward my window. Before I could react, a voice behind me said, calm and low, "Don't move." I froze. My breath caught. I turned slowly and saw a man leaning through the open back door, helmet, vest, rifle trained straight at me. My legs locked. "Please," I stammered, "please don't shoot." "Keep your hands up," he said softly, nice and high. I obeyed, shaking so hard my teeth clicked. "What's happening?" I whispered. "Lift your shirt," he said. I did. Turn around. Slower. When I turned, more officers flooded the hallway. They swept past me, heading for the stairs, boots pounding like thunder. One grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the back door. "Move, sir, now." They pushed me into the alley just as a voice shouted from above, "Go, go, go, armed entry." Then the crash of a door breaking, splintering wood echoing through the freezing dark. I stumbled into the snow, blinded by flashing lights. My ears rang with shouts, "Clear, check the closet. Secure the bedroom." A female officer guided me toward a police van, her voice steady but tense. "You're safe, sir. You're not under arrest. We just need to ask you questions." Inside, I sat on a metal chair, shaking uncontrollably. My breath came in gasps, and every sound felt too loud. The officer across from me, Detective Miles, spoke softly. "We need to talk about your upstairs neighbor." "I barely know him," I whispered. "That's all right," Miles said. Just tell me what you've noticed." I told them everything. The silence, the lights, the footprints, the child, the cigarette butts. My voice trembled the whole time. The detective nodded but said nothing, just took notes. When I asked what was going on, he hesitated, then said, "We can't share details, but it's a national security issue." "Was he dangerous?" I asked. Miles looked away. "Just answer the questions, Mr. Ray." They questioned me for hours. When it was over, they said I could return home, but not go upstairs. The building would remain under investigation. As I walked back through the snow, I saw black scorch marks on the stairwell where they'd forced the door. The upstairs windows were shattered. Inside, I glimpsed something strange, drawings on the walls, hundreds of them, all of a child in a white nightgown standing in snow. That night, I tried to sleep, but my dreams were filled with whispering, over and over the same voice. "Don't move." The next day, news spread fast. Thompson was small enough that everyone knew. The local station said the upstairs tenant had been under surveillance for months, suspected of planning something that could have taken dozens of lives. They said explosives were found, blueprints, maps. I sat on my couch, watching the coverage, shaking so hard the coffee spilled down my wrist. The anchor's voice said the suspect might have had help. I turned off the TV. For days, I packed my things, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I stepped outside, I saw shadows behind the windows, heard faint laughter in the wind. Once, I thought I saw a barefoot child again, standing near the edge of the frozen river. The landlord called eventually. "Mr. Ray, the property's being sealed for further investigation. We'll refund your deposit and help relocate you." I didn't argue. I just wanted to leave. Mara was still missing. Her family called me crying, begging for answers. I had none. The police found her coat 2 weeks later, buried in snow by the highway, no tracks leading to it, no sign of struggle. They said maybe she got lost, but I knew better. I moved into a small basement suite across town, newer, brighter, safer, or so I told myself. The people there were friendly. I tried to rebuild, to forget, but sometimes, late at night, I hear whistling again outside my window. The same 4 notes. And once, when I took the trash out, I found cigarette butts arranged in a small circle near the bins. The last thing that truly broke me happened 1 month after the raid. I got a call from Detective Miles. "We wanted to update you," he said. "The man upstairs, Halden, he's still missing." He wasn't in the apartment when we entered. I dropped the phone. That night, I stayed up till dawn, every light on. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed I was back at Birchview Road, standing in the snow, looking up at that empty window. Then the curtain moved, and a pale child's face looked down at me, smiling. I woke up sweating, gasping for air, the clock glowing 4:12 a.m. I heard the faint sound of footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. But I live on the top floor now. People say trauma tricks the mind. Maybe that's true. But I know what I hear. I know what I saw that winter night. Now, every time I step outside into the cold, I feel eyes watching. Every time wind blows across the snow, I hear whispers calling my name. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that man standing behind the child, both motionless, both waiting. And when the wind howls just right, when the world feels too still, I swear I can still hear that calm, quiet voice behind me saying, "Don't move." I was never the kind of person who believed in bad luck or cursed places. But that changed the winter I moved to Steinbach, Manitoba, when the snow never stopped falling and the nights felt far too long. I thought I was just starting over, but looking back now, it feels more like I was being led there. Like something had been waiting for me all along. After everything fell apart in Winnipeg, the job, the relationship, the version of myself I couldn't stand, I packed up what little I had and drove 2 hours southeast to Steinbach. It was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, maybe even healing. I told myself I just needed silence, space, air that didn't smell like the city. When I arrived, the cold hit me first. It wasn't the usual Manitoba chill, it was something deeper, the kind that crept under your skin and stayed there. My new place was a duplex on the edge of town, tucked on a narrow street called Cedar Hollow Drive. Snow lined every driveway, roofs sagged under frost, and the streetlights flickered like they were too tired to keep burning. The realtor, a woman named Clara, was waiting outside, her breath puffing clouds into the cold air. "Welcome to Steinbach," she said, handing me the keys. "People keep to themselves here. You'll fit right in." Her smile felt forced, like a line she'd said too many times. I brushed it off. Small towns always had quirks, right? The duplex was small but neat. 2 bedrooms and a cracked front porch that overlooked a frozen field. Across the road stood an old pale blue house with a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Even before I noticed the woman standing there, I felt eyes on me. She wore a thick gray coat and stood perfectly still, holding a mug that steamed in the cold. Her face was pale, almost colorless under the streetlight. "Evening," I said, lifting a hand. She didn't wave, didn't nod, just stared. Then she turned and walked inside, leaving the door to creak shut behind her. That should have been my first warning. The first few days passed quietly. I unpacked, set up my work-from-home routine, bought groceries from the local co-op. I'd always liked being alone, but the silence here felt different, dense, like it was listening. Sometimes, late at night, I'd pause my typing and realize I could hear something faint through the walls. A soft, dragging sound, like footsteps in the snow. By the end of the first week, I'd gotten used to the isolation. Then came the knocking. It was around 2:17 a.m. when I heard it the first time. 3 slow knocks on my front door. I sat up, heart thudding, listening hard. Nothing followed. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, maybe snow hitting the door. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same 3 knocks. On the 3rd night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I crept to the window beside the door, phone flashlight ready, and peeked out. Empty porch. Empty street. The snow was untouched. I felt my stomach twist. Probably some kids, I thought. Small town boredom. Pranks. But on the 4th night, when the knocking came again, this time sharper, louder, I flung the door open. No one. The wind howled in my face, cold enough to sting. I stepped onto the porch and felt it immediately. The air was colder than it should have been. The kind of cold that didn't make sense. And then I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. "Go home." I spun around, but the yard was empty, the trees still. My skin prickled all over. I slammed the door shut and locked it, every latch, every bolt. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, as I loaded my car, a man from 2 houses down waved. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, wearing a thick red flannel and snow boots. "You must be the new guy," he called. "Name's Jack." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound normal. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sleeping okay?" That question froze me. "Why do you ask?" Jack shrugged. "This street's got a history. People say the nights here don't always stay quiet." I forced a laugh. "You mean raccoons or something?" He didn't laugh back. "If you hear knocks, don't answer," he said. "Just stay inside, you'll be fine." Then he walked away, leaving me more uneasy than before. That evening, I saw the woman from across the street again. She was standing on her porch, coat buttoned to her neck, eyes fixed on my house. "Hi," I called. "Sorry if I'd been noisy moving in." "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. "Excuse me? This house, they don't like newcomers." I frowned. "Who's they?" She glanced toward the snow-covered field behind my duplex. "You'll see." Then she turned and went inside. I laughed it off, but something about her tone sat heavy in my chest. That night, the knocking came again, 3 sharp hits at 2:17 a.m. I froze, waiting, holding my breath. The sound echoed through the house, deeper this time, like it came from inside the walls. I counted the seconds, then silence. When I finally slept, I dreamed of water, ice cracking, hands reaching up through frozen rivers. A week later, Steinbach made the news. A young girl's body had been found near the frozen Red River, just beyond the bridge. I drove by out of curiosity, joining the small crowd of locals huddled near the yellow tape. A police officer guided a black bag onto a stretcher, zipping it closed. Someone whispered behind me, "That's the 3rd one this winter." Third what? I asked. Girl, the man said quietly. They find them every few years. Always girls, always near the water. I felt my throat tighten. Jack appeared beside me, his breath forming clouds in the air. You don't want to see this, he said softly. What's happening here? I asked. He stared at the frozen river, voice barely a whisper. This town remembers things, even when people don't. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I turned off every light, double-locked every door. Still, I couldn't rest. Around 2:17 a.m., I heard it again. 3 deliberate knocks, but this time, after the third, there came a voice. My name, soft, pleading. Evan, open the door, please. It was a woman's voice, the woman from across the street. I opened the door instantly. She stood there, shaking, her eyes wide with panic. They're here, she whispered. You have to stay quiet. Don't answer them. Don't even look out the window. Who's here? I asked. The ones who knock. Before I could ask again, the sound came. 3 more knocks, harder this time, rattling the walls. She grabbed my wrist, her grip like ice. Don't speak. They'll hear you. The knocking continued, louder, angrier. Then a voice outside spoke, deep and broken, like it was wearing human words as a disguise. Evan, we know you're there. She shook her head violently, mouthing, don't answer. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, dragging footsteps circling the house, moving toward my bedroom window. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. A whisper came right outside the glass. Let us in. Then came the sound of cracking. The window splintered, spiderwebbing under pressure. A gray hand pushed through, wet and swollen, fingers bending the wrong way. She screamed, "Run!" We bolted through the back door, stumbling into knee-deep snow. Behind us, something heavy moved fast, dragging across the ground. Don't look back, she shouted. We reached the road where the street lights flickered like dying candles. Jack's truck screeched to a stop in front of us. Get in, he yelled. We dove inside and he hit the gas, tires spinning against the ice. In the rearview mirror, I saw them. Figures emerging from the snow between the houses, pale, soaked shapes with hollow black eyes and dripping clothes. Their mouths opened and the wind carried a whisper. Evan. We sped through town, snow whipping against the windshield. When we finally stopped near an old grain mill on the outskirts, Jack killed the engine. The only sound was our breathing. You weren't supposed to move into that duplex, he said. That place was built over the old river path. I frowned. What does that mean? In the 1970s, Jack said slowly, the town rerouted the river after a string of drownings. People started saying the river was hungry. That's ridiculous, I said, though my voice shook. Maybe, he muttered. But the bodies kept showing up. The town learned to live with it. To adapt. I stared at him. Adapt how? He looked at me, his eyes hollow. We don't go out after midnight. We don't answer the knocking, the woman whispered. They came for my husband. He answered them. Her eyes glistened in the dim light. Now they'll come for you. We stayed in that freezing mill until sunrise. When Jack finally drove us back, the street looked untouched. No broken glass, no tracks, nothing. Like the night had never happened. But when I stepped inside my duplex, the air felt wrong. Warmer, heavier. On the kitchen table sat a wallet, damp and dark, water dripping from it onto the wood. I picked it up. Inside was an ID card. Name, Parker Wells. Address, my duplex. My unit. My chest went tight. Who is this? I whispered. Jack's face went pale. That's the last guy who lived here. The woman's voice trembled. They left it for you. I dropped the wallet, backing away. Then came the sound, not from the door, not from the window, from under the floor. Knock, knock, knock. We ran. I didn't stop until Steinbach was just a memory in my rearview mirror, fading under a pale gray sky. I didn't pack a single box, didn't take anything but the clothes on my back. For months, I tried to forget. But even now, hundreds of miles away, when the wind blows hard and the night is too quiet, I still hear it sometimes. 3 soft knocks. Knock. And a whisper that chills my blood, "Come home." I was 23 when I moved to Portage La Prairie, Manitoba. The kind of age when you're too grown to cry about leaving everything behind, but still young enough to feel the hole it leaves inside you like something broke open and never healed. My name is Noreen Grayson, but nobody calls me that anymore. People in my old city used to call me Gray, but here they just called me the new guy for months. My dad, Peter, was the reason we moved. He said he needed a new start, but adults always say that when they mean something dark, they don't want to explain. My mom just nodded like she had already fought that fight and lost. So we left Winnipeg one freezing January morning, the kind of cold that bites through your coat and burns your fingers even before the car warms up. The SUV smelled like old fries and damp cardboard stuffed with everything we owned. The highway stretched empty for hours, endless white fields buried under snow, fences half hidden under drifts, the sky heavy and gray. Then something changed. The city glow faded, the air got sharper, and the roads grew narrow. Portage La Prairie appeared like a ghost town frozen in time. Snow-covered roofs, quiet streets, old street lamps flickering orange in the wind. Dad turned into our new street, Willow Bend, the kind of street that looked peaceful but too still, like the world was holding its breath. Mom whispered that it looked safe, but her voice didn't sound sure. The house was bigger than our old one, 2 floors of pale brick and black shutters. Dad kept saying we got it cheap, but even at 23 I knew houses aren't cheap without a reason. The first day, the cold felt like it lived in the walls. The air smelled like wet wood and old smoke. On day 2, a neighbor showed up, a short woman with wind-chapped cheeks carrying a plate of cookies. She introduced herself as Margaret. "You folks moving into the Duval place?" she asked. Dad frowned. "The Duval place?" She smiled, thin and uneasy. "Yeah. Welcome to Portage." Then she left quick, like she'd said too much. That was clue number 1. The second clue came 3 nights later. Dad shook me awake around 2:17 a.m. His voice was low and tight. "Get up, Noreen." I followed him downstairs. Mom was already standing at the window, fingers clutching the curtain. Outside, the snow reflected the pale glow of the streetlight. That's when I saw it, something dark and lumpy in the yard, the snow around it uneven and messy. "What is that?" I asked. Mom's voice trembled. "It's not an animal." Dad's face twisted. "No, it's human." I blinked. "Human what?" He didn't answer. He just muttered a curse under his breath and turned away. By the end of the week, it happened 4 more times, always at night, always in different spots, always deliberate. Piles of human waste left in the snow, steaming in the cold like something alive. Dad tried to act calm, said it must be a sick prank. But Mom said what we were all thinking. "This isn't random," she whispered. "Nobody else on the street is getting this." Dad didn't answer. I overheard him later in the kitchen say something that froze my blood. "It's the same pattern as before." Before what? I didn't ask then. He started spending his nights awake on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, a baseball bat resting across his lap. He told me to go to sleep, but I couldn't. I stayed by my window and watched his silhouette until my eyes burned. The wind hissed through the trees, and every crunch of snow made me flinch. Then one night, around 3:41 a.m., I heard Mom scream. I ran downstairs. Dad burst through the door, snow on his boots, his eyes wide. "Call the police," he barked. Mom grabbed the phone, voice shaking. I saw dirt on Dad's jeans and something small in his hand, a rusted button, dull metal with 2 holes. "Where did that come from?" I asked. Dad stared at it like it could answer him. "He was wearing it," he said quietly. "Who?" Dad swallowed hard. "The man in our yard." Mom told the officer on the phone that the man had been naked, covered in mud, crawling through the snow. She said he laughed when he saw Dad watching. Dad's hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd never seen fear like that in him before. 2 days later, the Portage police sent a deputy. He looked half asleep and uninterested. "Y'all sure it wasn't some drunk?" Dad's jaw tightened. Human excrement and trespassing aren't drunks. The deputy shrugged, asked if we bought the house from the marshals. Mom nodded. He let out a long sigh. Yeah, they had problems too. What kind of problems? Dad asked. The deputy hesitated, looked toward the woods. You'd have to ask them. They left fast. Then he leaned close and said something that stayed in my head for weeks. If you see him again, don't try to talk. Don't go outside. Just call us. That night, Mom whispered that the marshals knew. Dad rubbed his face and said, yeah, they did. Then I asked the question that had been eating at me. Has this happened before? I said. Dad froze. Mom's eyes widened with anger. You never told him? He didn't need to know, Dad said. I shouted, I need to know now. Dad looked at me for a long moment and said quietly, yes, but not like this. After that, things got worse. The piles turned to footprints. The footprints turned to scratches on the back door. Then, one morning, we found muddy handprints on the shed. The snow was clean everywhere else. Only those prints remained, small and pressed deep, like the person had been crawling. Dad bought a camera and pointed it at the backyard. He barely slept. He just sat at the window with that bat watching. The house felt heavier every night, as if something outside was pressing against it. One night, a note appeared under a stone on the porch. Ragged handwriting, shaky letters, missed you. Mom dropped it, trembling. Dad tore it in half, then in half again, but the words still echoed in the air. He followed us, I whispered. Dad didn't answer, but the silence said everything. Days later, another strange thing happened. On my way home from work at the diner, I stopped at a gas station just outside town. The air stung my lungs as I stepped out to pump gas. A white van pulled up beside me. Inside sat a woman with messy hair, eyes wide like she hadn't slept in days. She rolled down the window and handed me a small folded paper. Her hand shook so badly I thought she'd drop it. Then she whispered, "Please, call the police," before driving off fast. The note said, "He's watching me too." I froze. The handwriting looked the same as the one from our porch. When I told Dad, he went pale. That night, he doubled the locks, checked the cameras again and again. The snowstorm came hard that week, howling winds and white walls of snow swallowing the street. But even then, I saw movement at the edge of the yard, a figure, bent low, crawling, vanishing whenever the light flickered. Then came the sound. Not footsteps, not scratching. Laughing, soft and broken, floating through the wind. Around 2:12 a.m., Dad yelled for Mom. I ran to the hallway. "He's here," Dad shouted. I looked out the window and saw him, a man crawling across the yard, thin, gray-skinned, his long hair stuck with ice. He was naked again, skin blue from the cold, eyes shining like he wasn't human. Dad threw open the door, shouting at him. Mom screamed for him to stop, but Dad didn't. He stormed out into the snow, camera in hand. The man stood, grinning, his teeth too wide, his skin shaking. Then he ran at my father, not stumbling, not scared, charging. Dad swung the bat. The man didn't flinch. He lunged, knocking the camera down, grabbing Dad's coat. I heard him whisper something before the sound turned to a horrible laugh. Dad's face went white as paper. He swung again. The man let go and ran, climbed the fence in one smooth motion, and disappeared into the woods. The cops came again. They found footprints, blood, and one piece of film that survived the shattered camera. The picture showed the man's face, sunken cheeks, cracked lips, and eyes that didn't look alive. They made flyers, ran stories, warned the town. People started locking doors. And then, 6 days later, the police knocked again. They said they found him sleeping under a bridge outside the city, miles away. But before they could question him, he was released by mistake. Some paperwork error, they said. Dad stared at the officer like he wanted to hit him. "You let him go," he shouted. The officer just said, "We made a mistake." Mom cried until her voice gave out. Dad said only one thing: "We're leaving tonight." We didn't pack, we didn't clean. We just left. We drove through the dark, through the storm, until the morning light broke across the fields. Now, years later, I'm 29. I live alone in another city. I tell myself, Portage was just a nightmare I grew out of, but sometimes nightmares grow with you. Last month, I went home to visit my parents. The old house still stood, silent, the windows dark. Dad looked older, tired. Mom kept glancing at the window like expecting something. Over dinner, I asked him, "Did they ever find that man?" Dad didn't speak for a long time. Then he said quietly, "He found us. I didn't understand." He met my eyes. "That man lived near us before you were born," he said. 2 houses down, he used to watch the house. One night he tried to break in. After that, we moved. Again and again. Every place we went, he found us. Not right away. Sometimes after months. Sometimes after years. But always. My stomach twisted. So Portage wasn't random. Dad shook his head. He wasn't doing it because he was sick. He was marking territory, telling us he was there. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cold crept through the walls again. Around 3:05 a.m., I looked outside. The snow glittered under the streetlight, calm, untouched, except for the edge of the yard. There, half hidden near the fence, were footprints. Fresh ones, pressed deep into the snow, leading to the woods. I told myself it was an animal. I tried to believe it, but then I saw something shiny lying by the tracks. I went out with a flashlight. The wind burned my face. The light caught it. An old button, rusted, with 2 holes. My hands started shaking. I dropped it and backed away. The woods were silent except for the crunch of snow under my boots. But then came a sound I hadn't heard in 6 years. A laugh, low, broken, drifting through the trees. I ran inside and locked the door. I pressed my back to it, waiting. The house groaned in the cold. Dad came down the hall, holding that same bat from years ago. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. "I still check the yard every night," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the wind screamed, and for a moment I thought I saw movement again, a shadow sliding along the fence. Sometimes I wonder if evil dies or just gets patient. Maybe he's still out there waiting for us to stop watching. Because even now, some nights when I walk past a window, I swear I see footprints under the snow. I never thought snow could remember your name. It started whispering mine the first week we came to Dauphin. Dad said the move was for a fresh start, but deep down I knew he was just running from the silence that followed Mom's death. He wanted somewhere quieter, cleaner, slower. A town where people smiled in grocery aisles and waved even if they didn't know you. He called it peace. I called it hiding. When we left Winnipeg that December morning, the clouds were the color of steel. The world looked frozen mid-breath. Dad kept humming along to the radio, pretending everything was fine while his knuckles stayed white on the steering wheel. I stared out at the endless white highway and tried not to think about what waited for us in that small northern town. We arrived at sunset. Dauphin was smaller than I imagined. A few glowing shop signs, a frozen river that looked solid enough to trap time, and rows of houses huddled together as if scared of the forest that loomed behind them. The house Dad rented sat on the edge of town, past the grain elevators, where the snow piled higher than fences. A crooked mailbox read, Haverly Road. The place looked strange, not old, not new. Half the siding was modern and clean, the other half cracked and sun-bleached like it had been borrowed from another century. Dad said it had character. I said it looked like it didn't want us there. A woman stood next door, scraping ice off her porch. She was tall, bundled in a heavy green parka with fur at the hood. When she noticed us, she paused mid-scrape, her eyes flicking from Dad to me before she forced a smile. "Welcome to Haverly Road," she said. "I'm Miss Peters." Dad shook her hand. "You're our neighbor?" Her gaze drifted over his shoulder to the frozen tree line that fenced the back of our yard. "You could say that," she murmured. Then she looked at me. "You're Leo, right?" I froze. Dad hadn't said my name. She caught herself. "Oh, the landlord mentioned your son, that's all." Small town. People talk. I nodded, though her smile never reached her eyes. They kept flicking back to the forest. like she expected something to step out at any second. That night I unpacked slowly, one box at a time. The wind hissed through the cracks around the window, carrying faint whistles that rose and fell like someone testing a note. I tried telling myself it was the pipes or the snow shifting on the roof, but deep down I knew the sound didn't belong to the house. Dad tried to lighten the mood by setting up the old game console. "Priorities," he said, tossing me a controller. "We'll unpack the rest tomorrow. For now, let's destroy some digital zombies." I managed to smile. But when he fell asleep on the couch around 1:20 a.m., I went to the kitchen for water and froze. Through the window, past the half-buried fence, a shape moved between the trees. Tall, still, watching. I blinked once, gone. I told myself it was a trick of headlights from a passing car, but Dauphin roads were empty that late. Then came the whistle again. A long, unbroken note that didn't waver, didn't fade. It sounded like breath held far too long. When I turned, something tapped the glass, just once. I jumped back, my pulse hammering, staring at my own reflection in the dark window. Only it wasn't just me. Behind my shoulder, in the reflection, stood a figure at the edge of the trees, taller than the porch light. Thin as a shadow stretched wrong. Then, nothing. By morning, the snow covered everything. Driveway, fence, footprints I might have imagined. Dad laughed at my pale face and said I needed more sleep. He didn't understand. Sleep was the last thing I wanted. The next day, school started. Dauphin Middle looked more like a church than a school. Narrow halls, heavy doors, the smell of old books and pine disinfectant. The walls were lined with trophy photos, but half the faces were blurred, like the camera refused to remember them. A girl with dark curls and a red scarf stopped beside my locker. "You're the new kid on Haverly Road, right?" "Yeah." "Why?" She frowned. "Just be careful." "Careful of what?" Her eyes darted to the window that faced the woods. "You'll hear it at night. Don't go outside when it does." Before I could ask more, she walked away fast, her boots squeaking on the linoleum. Everyone else acted the same. Polite smiles, nervous glances when I mentioned where I lived. One boy muttered, "You're on the wrong side of the ridge," and hurried off. That night, the whistle returned, this time closer. I pressed my ear to the wall, holding my breath, one note, low and steady, seeping through the cold. Then silence, then another whistle, shorter, higher, like an answer. A call and response in the dark. Dad didn't hear it. Or maybe he didn't want to. Days passed. Snow deepened. Every time I looked at the forest, I felt the same wrongness. Not danger exactly, but recognition, as if part of me already knew that silence. One Saturday, Dad insisted we go into town. "We can't just hole up all winter," he said. Misty's Diner is supposed to be the best breakfast north of Winnipeg. The diner sat on Main Street, painted light blue with Christmas lights still up from years past. Inside, everyone went quiet when we walked in. The waitress, Tess, guided us to a booth. "You folks the ones renting out on Haverly Road?" Dad grinned. "That's us. Nice little spot." Tess's smile faltered. "Well, if you ever hear something at night," she paused, glancing toward the window where frost traced spider veins across the glass, "don't go outside." Dad laughed. "Coyotes?" "No," she whispered, "not coyotes." Before we could ask more, a man at the counter called her over. He was older, wearing a thick coat with snow still melting off the sleeves. His eyes locked on me and didn't move. When he saw I noticed, he crook motioned with one finger. Dad frowned. "Stay here, Leo." "I'll talk to him." I shook my head, but Dad was already up. Their conversation was short. Dad came back pale. "What did he say?" I asked. "Nothing that matters. Finish your pancakes." He didn't speak again all the way home. That night I heard two whistles again. One long, one short, followed by soft crunching outside, slow and careful like footsteps testing the snow. I crept to the window and saw faint glows between the trees, like eyes catching light. Yellowish, not animal, not human. Then a whisper drifted through the glass. "Leo." The voice was wrong. Stretched, heavy, like someone dragging words through water. I stumbled back. Dad burst in holding a flashlight. "What happened?" "Something's out there." He looked, saw nothing, sighed. "We've talked about this," but the look in his eyes said maybe he wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, a blizzard rolled through, heavy enough to bury cars. School was canceled. That's when I saw the news online. A student named Owen didn't come home last night. Police were searching near the river, near the same woods behind our house. My stomach dropped. That night, the whistle came again, low and long, followed by slow breathing against the siding outside my room. The kind of breath that fogs glass. I opened the curtain just a sliver. Footprints, bare, leading from the trees to below my window. Huge, sunken prints, as if whoever made them weighed too much for this world. Dad saw them too, his face drained. He grabbed his phone, called the police. By the time they arrived, the snow was untouched, smooth as if nothing had ever walked there. The officer looked tired. "Just stay inside after dark," he said softly. Nobody should live that close to the ridge. Dad's jaw tightened. "What's the ridge?" The man hesitated. "Locals call it the line. Don't cross it." That night, Dad locked every door, every window, and sat with me in the living room, the bat across his lap. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said finally. "The man at the diner, he said your house wasn't empty when we moved in." My stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Dad swallowed. He said, "It comes for the boy first." Before I could speak, the lights flickered out. The heater groaned. Then, from the kitchen came a voice, soft, close. "Just a step outside, Leo." Dad's grip tightened. "Don't answer it." Then the voice said, "It's your year." The words clawed inside my chest like a memory. I felt pulled toward the door, like something beyond it had been waiting since before I was born. Dad shook me hard. "Stay with me. Look at me." The light snapped back on. Silence swallowed the house. We didn't sleep. At dawn, Dad started packing. "We're leaving. Today." I didn't argue. By nightfall, the car was ready, engine idling in the cold. Dad stayed in my room that final night, sitting in a chair by the door. We kept the lamp on. Outside, snow drifted heavy and soundless. Then, crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps again, slow, deliberate. The whistle came, long and low, followed by another, shorter, a reply. Dad whispered, "Stay behind me," but I moved to the window. I had to see. At the tree line stood Owen, the missing boy, barefoot, eyes pale as frost. His skin gray, lips blue. Behind him towered the figure, taller than the trees, hooded, its face a hollow blur, breath steaming in long, even clouds. Dad shouted, "Owen, come here." The boy didn't move. The figure did. It raised one long arm and pointed at me. Dad ran for the door. I screamed, "Don't!" He stepped into the snow. The figure lowered its arm and whispered something that made the wind itself go still. The trees groaned like they were alive. The snow around the figure darkened, sinking. Dad grabbed my wrist, pulling me back inside as the door slammed shut on its own. Then silence. Through the window, Owen was gone. The forest was still again. But just before dawn, as we loaded the car, the woman next door, Ms. Peters, was standing in her yard barefoot in the snow. She didn't wave. She just said quietly, "It won't follow you past the border." "Keep driving." We did. We drove south without stopping until the snow turned to sleet and the forest thinned behind us. Dad gripped the wheel like he could hold the world together by force. We never spoke of it again. We changed our names. New city, new lives. For a while, I believed it was over. But last week a letter came, no stamp, no address. Inside, a torn scrap of paper with 4 words written in ash-gray ink. "Snow falls tomorrow night." Outside, the sky was heavy and still. Somewhere far off, faint as breath through glass, I heard it again. The whistle, long and patient, waiting for me to answer. I never meant to write this down. I only want it out of my head. My name is Matteo Rinaldi. I am a restaurant guy, second generation, the kind who grew up washing dishes before he could reach the sink. My father built our little Italian place in Winnipeg from nothing but grit and recipes, and when he died, the keys became my burden. I tried to keep it alive, but the world changed. Delivery apps took their cut, costs climbed, staff vanished, and the math stopped working. I have a wife, 2 kids, a stack of bills, and a constant knot in my chest. So I started hunting for a calmer town, somewhere cheaper, somewhere people still sat down to eat. That search pulled me towards Selkirk, Manitoba. The night this started, the sky was already heavy, and the cold had that sharp bite that makes your teeth ache. I drove north, thinking I would look at a storefront and head back. My phone was low, my patience lower, and I kept telling myself this was just business, just survival. Then my GPS froze and rerouted. It nudged me off the main road onto a quieter stretch, then quieter, then almost dead. The trees leaned inward, snow drifted across the shoulder like pale smoke, and the world felt muffled, as if sound could not travel far. I told myself it was normal. Winter does this, roads get weird, signals drop. I saw an exit sign ahead. The green board was faded, and the town name looked scraped at, like someone had tried to erase it with a tool. Not fully gone, just damaged. My stomach tightened for no clean reason. I was hungry, tired, and I wanted coffee. I took the exit, thinking 10 minutes, tops. The place I drove into did not look abandoned, and that was the problem. Houses were neat, driveways cleared, curtains drawn, warm lights inside, cars parked, but no people. No one walking, no one shoveling, no kids, no dogs, no moving traffic. It looked like a town that had paused itself. Even the snow felt untouched, no footprints, no mess, no signs of life outside. A diner sign buzzed at the center, old neon flickering like it could not decide its color. I parked and noticed several cars in the lot frosting over, but no one getting in or out. The buzz of the neon followed me as I walked to the door, like a trapped insect whining in my ear. Inside was warm and smelled like fried onions and old coffee. Only one booth was occupied. A couple sat there, and the second I stepped in, they froze. A middle-aged woman stopped stirring her cup. A thin man with heavy eyelids stared at me like I had stepped into his house without knocking. I tried a polite wave, nothing. A young server came from the back, early 20s, long braid, pale cheeks. Name tag, Nora. She studied me like she was solving a problem. "You are new," she said, and it did not sound like a greeting. "Just passing through," I told her. I got turned around, need a quick bite. Her smile appeared, but it did not reach her eyes. "Sit anywhere, but eat quick," she said. "Kitchen is closing." I glanced at the clock behind her. It was barely afternoon. "Closing?" I asked. She nodded like it was obvious. "It is Saturday." I ordered a hot sandwich. It arrived too fast, like they had it waiting. Like they wanted me to swallow and vanish. I tried to make small talk anyway, because silence in that room felt dangerous. I said I was scouting Selkirk, maybe opening a place, maybe starting over. Nora's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Her face went flat for a beat. "It is home," she said quietly. I told her the streets seemed empty. Her voice sharpened, not angry, not rude, just warning. "People stay in on Saturdays, all of them," she said. "That is how it is." After that, even the diner lights felt too bright. The couple in the booth kept watching in short glances, like they were afraid of being caught looking. When I went to pay, Nora leaned in, pretending to wipe the counter. Her voice dropped low. "Get fuel before you leave," she murmured. "The station at the edge, then keep driving." "Why?" I asked, my throat tight. "Do not be here after dark," she said. I wanted to ask what dark meant in a place that already felt dim, but she walked away like she had said too much. Outside, the air felt thicker. Across the street, a man stood perfectly still. No phone, no cigarette, no movement, just staring at me with a blank face. I nodded out of habit. He did not respond. When I drove past him, his head turned slowly, following my car with smooth precision. It made my stomach twist like I had swallowed ice. I drove to the fuel station. 2 pumps, chip paint, a small office with a sagging roof. A rusty bell jingled when I entered. An older man sat behind the counter watching a tiny television. Gray beard, big hands, work-worn face. He smiled at first, and the warmth almost calmed me. "Afternoon," he said. "Where you headed?" "Back toward Winnipeg after Selkirk," I said. "I got detoured." He nodded. "Pumps are slow, but they work." "Good," I said. "I can handle slow. I just need enough to get back." His smile faltered. His eyes flicked toward the back room as if something might be listening. "You are not staying, right?" he asked. "No," I said quickly. He leaned forward. The friendly mask fell away, and what was left was fear. "Do not look around here," he whispered. "Do not ask about here. Do not come back." My mouth went dry. "What is this place?" I asked, hating my own curiosity. He swallowed hard. "I am trying to help you," he murmured. "Do not move here. Not even if you think it is cheap. Not even if you think it is quiet." A woman stepped out from the back like she had been summoned by my question. Thin, hair pulled tight, eyes sharp. She snapped his name, and he fell silent instantly. She faced me with a tight smile. "You have what you need," she said. "You should go now." I paid and left. As I got into my car, I looked back. Both of them were in the window, staring at me, not waving, not smiling, just watching. I drove out fast. The roads were worse now, emptier. No cars, no animals. No movement. The world felt scrubbed. At a four-way intersection, the traffic light blinked red like a warning light. I slowed. That is when I saw Nora again, standing at the corner, braid messy, cheeks red from cold. She looked like she had been running hard. She knocked on my window in quick, urgent taps. I rolled it down halfway. "Nora, what is going on?" Her eyes darted behind me toward the tree line. "You need to leave now," she said. "You should not have talked to the man at the station." "Who are they?" I asked, the words tasting wrong. "Everyone," she said, eyes shining with tears. "Please do not stop here again. Do not look back. Do not try to understand it. Just go." Then she stepped away like she had touched fire and ran toward the trees behind an abandoned house, disappearing between dark trunks. I drove. I did not look back. When I got home, I told my wife, Camila, the whole thing, trying to make it sound like simple, small-town weirdness. She did not laugh. She went pale and told me to forget it. That night at 2:17 a.m., I stared at the ceiling and felt watched in my own bedroom. The feeling was not imagination, it was pressure, like eyes resting on the house. I forced myself to look outside. Nothing. Just the street light and the tree line across the road. I tried to move on. Months passed. I convinced myself it had been a strange community, private people, odd Saturday rule. But then, the weirdness followed me like snow stuck to a boot. A neighbor kid, 15, named Jace, biked home one night during light snowfall. It was 7:45 p.m., already black outside. He later told his mom he heard footsteps behind him on the packed snow, steady and close. He sped up. The footsteps sped up. He said it kept happening for almost a mile, the steps never tiring, never changing rhythm, always the same distance behind, like a metronome. He glanced back and saw a man-shaped figure walking in the snow, tall and pale against the streetlights, arms hanging straight down. Jace cut across yards and over snowbanks. The footsteps followed without slowing. When he reached his driveway, he spun around ready to yell. No one was there. But the footprints were, a clean line in the snow that ended at the edge of his driveway like the follower had stopped at an invisible line. A week later, my sister-in-law Dana called crying. Her baby monitor picked up a whisper from inside the nursery, even though the door was locked. She thought it was her husband. It was not. The monitor crackled again, and the whisper said the baby's name, slow and careful, like someone tasting it. Dana and her husband rushed to the nursery. Door still locked, window locked, baby asleep. But the monitor hissed like someone was breathing close to it. Then the boot prints showed up at my house. After a fresh snowfall, I opened the door and saw deep prints leading from the sidewalk straight to my front window. The tread was sharp. Whoever made them had stood right there, close enough to fog the glass. But there were no prints leading away. It was like something walked to the window and then simply stopped existing. After that, I started checking locks twice. I started closing blinds early. I started listening for sounds that should not be there. I started dreaming about the scraped exit sign and the buzzing diner. I swore I would never drive that way again. But life does not care what you swear. A year after the first detour, I was on the highway during heavy snow, coming back from a supplier run. Visibility dropped. The GPS glitched again. And there it was, the same exit sign, greener in daylight but still wounded, the town name almost scraped away completely. My hands tightened on the wheel. "No," I whispered. I tried to stay on the main road. The car slid slightly on ice and I had to slow. Snow thickened and the world narrowed to my headlights. A figure appeared on the shoulder. I slammed the brakes. It was Nora. Her hair was shorter now, cut unevenly. Her face thinner, eyes darker. She looked like she had not slept in months. She did not smile. She did not blink. I lowered the window halfway. "Nora, what are you doing here? You came back," she whispered. "I did not mean to," I said. "It was the weather, the GPS. You need to go now," she said, "before they see you." "Who?" I asked, even though I already felt the answer. She looked toward the trees behind her. "They do not let people leave twice," she said, her voice trembling. My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means you already got away once," she said, "and they noticed." I followed her gaze, and my blood turned cold. Between the trees stood silhouettes. Dozens, human-shaped. Too still, too evenly spaced. The snow fell onto them, and they did not brush it off. They did not sway with the wind. They simply waited, like fence posts carved into people. Even from the road, I could feel their attention like weight on my chest. Nora leaned in close, breath fogging. "Drive, Mateo. Do not slow down, do not stop, do not ever come back. If you come back again, they will not let you leave a third time." My body moved before my thoughts did. I shut the window, hit the gas, and forced the car forward to the slip. Tires screamed, then caught, and I shot down the road. In the mirror, for one fraction of a second, I saw Nora step back, and the silhouette seemed closer, not walking, not running, just closer, like they moved only when you did not look. I did not look again. I drove until I saw familiar lights. I told no one about seeing her again because saying it felt like opening the door for it. But the nights got worse. Some evenings I would catch a shape across the street near the trees, perfectly still. When I blinked, it would be gone, and when I looked again, it would be back, slightly shifted, like it was learning the distance between my home and theirs. One night at 3:12 a.m., an old baby monitor we kept in a drawer crackled, even though it was unplugged. Camila sat up, eyes wide, and we listened. A faint breath, then a low whisper, slow and careful like a mouth close to a microphone. It said my name. In the morning, fresh boot prints appeared again, leading to my front window, and again, none leading away. That is when I understood what I did not want to accept. Maybe that place was not a town you visit. Maybe it is a thing that notices you and keeps a memory of you and follows the trail back like scent. I checked maps months later. Nothing. No town, no label, no dot. The exit sign still existed, but the letters were gone, only pale scars where the name used to be. Some nights I sit in silence and watch the tree line. When the wind dies, the world goes quiet in the same way it did on that detour, like everything is listening. And sometimes I see the silhouettes between the trunks, spaced too evenly, not moving, waiting. I tell myself it is shadows, but shadows do not leave boot prints that stop at your window, and they do not whisper through a locked baby monitor, and they do not follow a teen on a bike for almost a mile without ever getting tired. If your GPS ever drags you off the highway on a Manitoba winter night, do not trust it. Do not stop. Do not ask questions. Do not look into the trees. And if you see a tired girl on the shoulder begging you to keep driving, listen to her, because getting away once might be luck, getting away twice might be mercy, and I do not think anyone gets a third chance. I never thought I would restart my grown-up life in a town I had never heard of, but life does not ask permission. It grabs you and drops you where it wants. My name is Ryan, and I can trace the start of everything back to the night I drove into Winkler, Manitoba, when winter had turned the world into a white, silent place, and even my phone map kept freezing like it did not want to guide me there. I came for work, nothing heroic, just survival. My dad died and left me debts, not comfort, and then my relationship broke apart because I was always tense, always drowning in worry. I packed my car and ran, not because I was brave, but because staying felt like dying slowly. I got hired as a night inventory tech at a cold storage warehouse outside town, the kind of place that keeps food frozen for trucks. The hours were rough, but the pay was steady, and steady pay felt like oxygen. The warehouse sat past the last streetlights, beyond the town's warm windows, where the land flattened into open fields the locals called the flats. In winter it looked endless, and the wind never stopped. It cut across the snow like it had teeth. I rented a small pale house at the edge of those fields because it was cheap. The porch creaked, the paint peeled, and the heater fought a losing battle against the cold, but I told myself I only needed a place to sleep. When I picked up the keys, my landlord, an older man named Alden Harrow, smiled too hard, like it was a mask he forgot to take off. "You are the new one," he said. "Yeah," I said, "just moved in. We do not get many new ones out here anymore," Alden said. "Folks do not stick around like they used to." And then he leaned closer and said it like a rule. "This place is quiet, real quiet. We like it that way. No trouble, no drifters, no noise." No noise. The way he said it felt less like advice and more like a warning. That first night I cracked a window because the house felt stuffy, and I wanted fresh air. The wind pushed cold into the room, and outside I heard crickets buried under snow, distant train horns, and once in a while a soft shuffle in the field. Probably an animal, I told myself. Around midnight, I woke up to 3 slow knocks on my front door. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, not angry, just calm, like whoever it was had all night. My stomach sank. I stayed still and listened. Nothing. I got up, walked to the door, and called out, "Who is there?" Silence. I peeked through the narrow window by the door. The road was empty, the fields were dark, and the wind made the snow move in thin waves like it was breathing. I locked the door twice and told myself it was the house settling. Sleep did not come easy after that. The next day at the diner, the waitress, a tired woman named Tessa, poured coffee and watched me like she was trying to read my face. "You are living in Alden Harrow's place," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "Welcome, I guess," she said, and her voice dipped like she regretted it. A man at the counter turned his head. "You hear anything last night?" My heart jumped. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Sound travels weird across the flats. Folks hear knocking, banging voices. Cold does that." His words were casual, but his eyes refused to meet mine. When I paid, Tessa leaned in and whispered, "Do not open your door at night." My throat tightened. "Why?" She glanced toward the window, toward the white land beyond town. "People get nervous after dark, that is all." At the warehouse, I met my crew. My supervisor was Corbin, quiet and steady. Another worker was Nolan, all nervous energy, and an older guy named Briggs who limped and smoked like he was angry at his own lungs. During a break, Nolan asked me straight, "You living by the flats?" "Yeah," I said. "You hear anything yet?" Nolan asked. I hesitated, then said, "Knocking, first night." Corbin snapped his thermos down. "Stop," he said. "Do not scare the new guy." Nolan muttered, "Rude is letting him walk in blind." Briggs looked at me with pale, tired eyes. "This town is not city dangerous," he said, "but people out here get superstitious, especially in winter. You keep your head down, you avoid the dark, you will learn." He said it like a line he had repeated before. A few nights later, I came home around 7:45 p.m., and a note was taped to my door. "Do not open your door after dark, not for anyone, no name, no reason." My hands went cold even inside my gloves. The porch light flickered, and the wind dragged a low whispering sound across the fields. That week, someone started slipping photos under my door. The first one showed 2 small boys in winter jackets, smiling in front of a school sign. The next one was a little girl on a sled, bright eyes, pink cheeks like she did not know she was being watched. Then another and another, always children, always close, like the photographer was standing too near. It made my skin crawl because it felt personal, like a message meant for my fear. One night, close to 2:17 a.m., I woke to gravel crunching outside. Footsteps, slow, careful. I crawled to the window and lifted the blinds a crack. A young woman stood by my mailbox, barefoot in snow, no coat, shaking hard, her head tilted like she was listening to something deep in the field. I tapped the glass. She snapped her head toward me. Her eyes were wide, panicked, and she mouthed words without sound. "Do not open." Then she backed away fast and vanished into the dark. In the morning, I confronted Alden. "A girl," he repeated, stiff. "Yeah," I said. "She looked like she needed help." Alden shook his head. "We do not have young girls living out that way." And then his voice went flat. "You see something in the dark out here. You ignore it. That is how you stay safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then shut it. "Just remember what I said." I needed answers, so I went to the library, and the librarian, Morris, eyed me like I was trouble. "You are the one in that house," she said. "I just want to read about town history," I told her. She sighed and brought out a thin binder. "Read it here, do not take it home." The binder was full of old clippings, missing people, families, a couple found dead near the flats, a teen gone after answering a knock. No suspects, no clean endings. My stomach turned. "This place has seen more loss than it deserves," Maris said, "and you should not dig. Winter preserves what people try to bury." A few days later, right after dark, my doorbell rang, followed by 3 knocks. A voice called out, "Winkler Police, open up, we need to talk." My heart slammed. I moved close to the door and spoke through it. "What is your name?" "Open the door," the voice said. "We have questions." I looked through the peephole. A man in a dark jacket stood there, but I could not see a badge, no patch, nothing official. "Show your badge," I said. Silence. Then his tone sharpened. "Open the door now." My phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Do not open. There is no badge." The doorknob twitched like he was testing the lock. I backed up and grabbed a heavy flashlight. The knob twisted again. Then footsteps moved away, slow, unhurried, like he knew exactly where I lived and planned to return. That night the wind got worse. Snow hammered the window sideways, and I heard a scream cut through the storm, sharp and desperate, coming from the flats. I ran to the window. Lightning flashed, and for a half-second I saw something moving out there, low, dragging itself across the snow. Then the dark swallowed it again. Another scream, closer. My hand went to the doorknob. Then the warnings hit me like a slap. "Do not open." The scream stopped suddenly, like someone had shut a mouth. After that, whispers drifted around my house, thin layered voices sliding past the walls, and every time I tried to understand the words, my ears filled with pressure like I was underwater. The next day at work, Briggs watched my face and sighed. "It uses bait," he said, badge, voices, screams, anything to make you open the door, and once you do not come back the same. That evening I saw a figure standing far out in the field, not moving, just facing my house. I blinked, and it was closer. No footsteps. No sound, just closer. I locked my door and shut the blinds. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. A buzzing sound rose outside my bedroom window, like a tiny motor fighting the freezing wind. I peeked. A drone hovered outside my glass, lights blinking, holding steady in the storm like it wanted to look inside. It drifted closer until it tapped the window softly. My phone buzzed. "Do not let it see inside." I dropped down away from the window and sat on the floor, breathing fast, until the buzzing faded. Around 2:44 a.m., the knocks returned, faster, harder. My phone buzzed again. "Do not open, no matter what voice you hear." Then a voice outside said my name, and it sounded exactly like Corbin. "Ryan, open up. It is me. I need help." My blood went cold. "Corbin," I called. "What is wrong?" Silence. Then his voice again, flatter. "Wrong. Open up, please." My phone buzzed. "That is not Corbin." The doorknob moved, slow, testing, and then the voice deepened into something rough, like a throat tearing open. "Open the door." Something slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I stumbled back, gripping the flashlight. Then silence, sudden and heavy, and footsteps walking away slow, like it had nothing but time. When morning finally came, I opened the door crack. A tooth sat on the porch, white against the wood. Human. I gagged and shut the door. I drove to the warehouse even though it was my day off. Corbin was there, alive, drinking coffee. "Did you come to my house last night?" I demanded. Corbin frowned no, and I do not go near the flats after dark, not ever. "Then what is out there?" I whispered. He stared at me a long moment, then said quietly, "This town buries ugly things, but the land remembers, and sometimes what gets buried learns how to knock." "What do I do?" I asked. Corbin's face stayed hard. "You leave before it learns you." So I packed to leave at sunrise, bags by the door, keys in my pocket, alarm set for 5:30 a.m., and I sat with every light on. At 1:12 a.m., the knocking started again, like fists, angry, demanding. My phone lit up. "If you open, you will not leave." Then the voice outside changed. It became my father. "Ryan," it said, soft and broken, exactly how I remembered. "Open the door, son. I need to see you." My eyes burned. Grief rose in my throat like bile. Because it sounded so real, it hurt. "Please, son," the voice whispered, "just 1 minute." I sank to the floor shaking, and I covered my ears. Then the voice twisted, deeper, wrong, like something chewing the sound. "Open the door." A child cried somewhere near the porch, low and cold, and I saw those photo faces in my mind, and my stomach rolled. My phone buzzed one last time. It is bait. I stayed on the floor until the sky turned gray. When the morning finally came, the sound stopped, the knock stopped, the voices vanished like they were never there. I left at sunrise, threw my bags into my car, and drove until the town disappeared in my mirrors. A month later, I saw a post online. The house at the edge of the flats burned down, electrical fire, they said. After that, a delivery driver went missing near the same stretch of road, his truck found idling, door open, snow drifting in like the land was swallowing it. I deleted the post. I moved on. But sometimes, in the early quiet, when the wind hits just right, I still hear it, soft, slow, patient. Knock, knock, knock. I stopped believing sleep was automatic after Morden, Manitoba, because one winter night taught me rest is not a reflex, it is a permission, and something out there learned how to revoke it. My name is Cal Mercer, 27 at the time, broke, grieving, and running on fumes. My mom died and left me problems instead of comfort, debt letters, late payments, and a rusted van that still started like it was loyal to her memory. I was working nights as a security guard near Winnipeg, standing in cold warehouses while other people talked into headsets like I was invisible. Rent kept climbing, my pay did not, and grief made every day feel heavier than it should. In early January, my cousin called and said there was a cheap house in Morden, cheap, the kind of price that sounded like a typo. I wanted quiet more than I wanted logic, so I drove down under a low gray sky, snow sliding across the road like sand. The moment I rolled into town, the place felt old in a way I could not explain, like the land had been holding its breath for decades. The house sat on the edge of town, small, dark siding, porch sagging, backyard uneven under drifts. The seller, Leonard Grout, wore heavy boots and spoke like every sentence was missing half its truth. He kept pointing at harmless things, roof, porch, furnace, and he avoided looking at the backyard like it could look back. The price was wrong, but I was desperate for a reset, so I signed. On move-in day, the cold cut sharp. While I carried boxes, my neighbor walked over, bundled in a bright parka, cheeks red from wind. Her name was Maren Voss, and she spoke friendly but cautious, as if she was balancing kindness and warning in the same breath. She told me folks here watched newcomers, and I should keep my nights quiet and my life simple. Then she looked toward my backyard and went still. She told me not to dig back there once spring came. I asked why, and her answer came too fast, like it was rehearsed. Old sewer trouble, unstable soil, not safe. She smiled, but her eyes did not. Then she left, boots squeaking over packed snow, and the quiet behind her felt sharper than it should. 2 days later, the furnace struggled, and cold pooled in the basement like water. I went down with a flashlight, trying to act like a homeowner instead of a frightened renter in disguise. Near the back wall, I noticed a rectangle of newer concrete, a patch that did not match the rest, like someone had tried to erase something and hoped time would do the rest. I chipped at the edge with a tool, expecting cracks and crumbling. Instead, the metal hit something hard and hollow, a deep thunk that buzzed through my bones. I cleared a little more and saw something pale and curved in the gap. Bone. Not a small bone, not an accident bone, thick and human in a way my brain did not want to accept. I pulled back more concrete and found teeth, a jaw, the shape of a skull half trapped under what looked like a rushed cover-up. My throat turned dry, my heart kicked hard, and the basement suddenly felt smaller, as if the house was leaning inward to listen. I called the sheriff's office with shaking hands. The man who answered sounded tired, but his response was too calm, too fast, like he had heard versions of this before. He told me to stop touching anything, go upstairs, keep the lights on, and wait by the front door. While I waited, I looked out the living room window. Across the street, under a street lamp, someone stood in the blowing snow. Tall, thin, put up, no movement. Wind slapped the lamp, snow whipped sideways, and that figure stayed planted like it was nailed to the sidewalk. I watched, expecting a shift, a step, a wave. Nothing. My stomach tightened. I blinked hard, checked again, and it was still there, staring at my house like it knew the layout. When police headlights finally washed up the road, the figure was gone, not walking away, just absent. Like the moment I had help, it stopped being visible. Sheriff Darnell Pike arrived with 2 deputies. He was tall, mustache, military posture, eyes that measured before they judged. He asked when I bought the house, asked if anyone else had been inside, asked if I had dug anywhere else. His questions were normal, but his face said my address was not. They taped off my basement, photographed the patch, and worked with careful hands. Marin appeared on my porch while they did, her face pale like she had been waiting for this phone call to happen someday. She did not ask what I found, she just said, "I found them, didn't I?" I asked who them meant, and she hesitated, like the truth had teeth. Then she said people here did not talk about the Galloway place. She said the family that used to live here vanished midwinter decades ago. No goodbye, no proof they left, only rumors that never settled because nobody wanted to dig. She said the town liked quiet endings, even when endings were not earned. The next day, the county team arrived with tents and bright lights. My yard turned into a work site, and the basement turned into a crime scene. I heard murmurs I was not meant to hear. I heard a deputy whisper that one set looked small. I heard another snap at him to shut up. Sheriff Pike's shoulders stayed tense, like he was bracing for what the earth would admit. That night I tried to sleep and could not. The floodlights outside made the snow glow through my curtains. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw teeth in concrete. The house creaked in slow, heavy pops like joints. The air smelled clean, then suddenly damp like soil, then clean again, like the place was breathing. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to a sound that did not belong to a house. Crunching, slow. Outside. I pulled on boots and grabbed a flashlight because fear makes you stupid and brave at the same time. The cold slapped my lungs. I stepped into the backyard and sweat the beam across churned snow and metal fencing. In the far corner by the crooked fence, the light caught a silhouette, tall, thin, still. The beam hit it fully, and it did not run. It vanished. Not like someone ducked, there was nowhere to duck. It was simply gone like a picture erased. I stood shaking, scanning the white, and saw fresh tracks leading toward the fence, deep steps, then nothing, as if whoever made them had stepped into air. The next morning, a deputy showed me a boot print near the fence. Huge. Wrong tread, not county issued. He asked if I had company. My mouth could not form a joke. I shook my head, and he did not look relieved. 2 days later, the county packed up. The lights left. The yard stayed injured. Sheriff Pike told me the property would need more testing, and then he told me to lock my doors even during the day and not to go outside at night for any reason. He said it like it was a rule he had learned the hard way. That evening, Marin knocked hard on my door, urgent. She told me to come with her, and I followed her across the street to a warm house that smelled like wood stove heat. In the living room sat Clayton Voss, Marin's older relative, heavy-lidded eyes, hands rough, posture like he did not scare easy. He looked at me and said I woke the wrong ground. He told me the old story the town refused to say out loud. Orson Galloway lived there with his wife and 2 kids. Quiet man, kept to himself, then one winter, they stopped showing up. No school, no church, no store, just silence. The sheriff back then called it a move, filed it, and let it be, because small towns protect their own secrets the way snow protects what it covers. Clayton said, when land holds something long enough, it starts to think it owns it, and when you disturb it, it pushes back. I told him I saw a tall figure at night. Clayton stared at the floor, then said, "That is not a person, not anymore." Marin's leg bounced like she was trying to outrun a panic attack while sitting still. I drove home with my hands locked on the wheel and my eyes scanning every corner of white. At 7:45 p.m., I went into town for groceries, forcing normal like a mask. The store was quiet and bright, and the cashier glanced at my address on the screen and went stiff before recovering. That tiny reaction told me the town had been holding this secret longer than I had been alive. Outside, the parking lot was windswept and nearly empty. My van sat under a light pole. I walked toward it, keys in my fist. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. It came from beneath the van, slow and wet like someone exhaling through a tight nose. My whole body locked. I stared at the shadow under the bumper, heart hammering. The breathing stopped. Something shifted under the vehicle, and snow crumbled softly, and I saw a pale hand slide into view, fingers too long, nails dark, skin stretched thin like it did not belong in the cold. The hand retracted into shadow, as if it had proven a point. I ran back into the store, shaking, begging them to call police. 2 employees came outside with me, one holding a mop handle like it was a spear. We looked under the van. Nothing. No person. No hand. No tracks. Clean snow. I drove home feeling watched the entire way, like the darkness behind my headlights had eyes. That night, I locked every door and wedged a chair under the basement handle. I kept the lights on. I sat on the couch with a kitchen knife I did not trust, listening for proof that I was not imagining this. At 1:14 a.m., the chair scraped across the floor by itself. Not far, just enough. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. The basement handle turned slowly, and the chair vibrated as if something on the other side was testing weight and patience. Then the scratching started, not loud, not frantic, slow and deliberate like nails dragging along wood. The air turned colder. The soil smell returned. The scratching moved, not staying in one place, shifting as if something was climbing inside the walls, tasting the shape of the house, learning. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I told myself to run outside, but outside was wide and blind, and whatever this was, it already knew my yard better than I did. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed felt like a grin. At 2:31 a.m., the basement door rattled lightly. Then the chair slid again. This time, the basement door cracked open, just a few inches, and cold air poured out like the house exhaled winter. In the thin gap, my flashlight beam caught something pale. A hand, not flesh. Not flesh. Not warm, not alive. It pulled itself up the basement stairs, slow and steady, like it had all the time in the world. Something clicked as it moved, a dry sound like hard pieces brushing together. The thing rose higher, a tall, thin shape, face wrong in the dark, as if a skull wore shadow instead of skin. My body tried to move and failed. Fear pinned me where I stood. I could not scream, could not run, could not breathe properly. Then the voice hit my mind, not through my ears, through the back of my skull, cold and intimate like someone whispering from inside my brain. "You broke the seal." The thing lifted an arm and pointed at me. Behind it, the basement darkness felt crowded, like more presence pressed against the stairs. Then another thought, layered voices, not loud, just many, like a room full of mouths speaking at once. "We are not done." My vision narrowed, my knees buckled. The last thing I felt was the idea of my name being taken, memorized, owned. I woke outside in the snow at dawn with Sheriff Pike above me shouting, breath fogging. Marin stood behind him crying, hands over her mouth. My throat was raw like I had been screaming for hours, but I had no memory of sound. Then I saw the backyard. The area they had dug was disturbed again, but not by shovels. Snow and soil were clawed up, dozens of finger grooves carved through the white. Drag marks, handprints. The ground looked like it had tried to open. Sheriff Pike stared at it for a long time, then said they were sealing the property again. His face said he already knew what I could not explain. They let me pack a few essentials 2 days later with deputies watching. I left most of my stuff behind because objects felt cursed by association. While I carried my last bag out, Marin hugged me like she was trying to keep me from being dragged back. She whispered that this town did not let go of its dead easily. As I drove out, a blizzard began to rise again, snow thickening in my headlights. I glanced in the mirror once, and there, under the gray sky, across the road behind me, the tall figure stood at the edge of visibility. Still. Watching. Not moving. I drove faster. Weeks later, in a different place with different locks, I still do not sleep right. Some nights, when the room is quiet, I smell damp soil where there is no soil. Some nights I wake with dirt under my nails like my body has been digging without me. And sometimes, just as I start to drift, I hear a soft scrape, slow and patient, like a nail dragging across wood, and a thought presses gently against my mind like a fingertip. We remember your name now. I remember that winter night like a wound that never healed, the kind that throbs when the wind howls through the empty streets of Selkirk. I didn't believe in ghosts until I saw one 5 times. It started at the funeral home, the first time I saw her after she was gone. Her name was Clara, my cousin. She was 12, 1 year younger than me, the kind of kid who burned with too much light and shadow at once. Her small body lay in a white coffin, her skin pale like frost under the lights, curls of golden hair resting around her face. She looked peaceful, but I remember how wrong that peace felt. The room smelled of lilies and candle wax, thick and heavy. My mother pressed her palms together and whispered prayers while I stood there, my throat locked. I closed my eyes and muttered the Lord's Prayer and Hail Mary in my head because I didn't know what else to say. When I opened them, I realized tears were running down my face. Clara had been my favorite cousin, wild, funny, and unpredictable. She'd play pranks, vanish into the woods behind our house, swim alone in the pond even though my mother warned us never to. She used to pluck the blue roses from the backyard, climb onto the roof, and let their petals fall one by one, as if spelling something only she could read. Sometimes I wondered what she saw when she looked down from up there. That's where she died, on that roof, one cloudy summer evening. She fell, cracked her head on the stone tiles below. Everyone said it was an accident. I didn't think much beyond that, until I saw her again. It was 6 months later, a dark April night in Manitoba, the snow outside melting into dirty puddles under the dim streetlights. I was asleep in my room when I felt someone shaking my shoulder. I thought it was Mom, but when I opened my eyes, it was Clara standing there. She looked exactly as I remembered her, alive, solid, but every few seconds her figure flickered like an old film reel about to burn out. She didn't speak, but I heard her voice inside my head, soft and clear, like a thought that wasn't mine. She held out her hand, and when I took it, she led me out of bed. My hand passed through her arm when I tried to hold her tighter. I realized she could touch me, but I couldn't touch her. She brought me to the guest room, the one she used to sleep in during summer visits. She stopped at the window facing the roof and looked back at me. She didn't move or say anything, just stared until I understood she wanted me to open it. I struggled with the swollen frame, the wood creaking loud enough to wake the house. I heard my mother's footsteps across the hall. The moment the door opened, Clara vanished like a gust of cold air. The next morning, Mom asked why the guest window was half open. I said nothing. It happened again 6 weeks later, late May. Same feeling, something pulling me from sleep, the air around my bed colder than winter wind. Clara stood there, her face pale but her eyes bright. She took my hand, and again we walked the hallway in silence. This time she led me to her brother's room, Daniel, my other cousin. The window there was also stuck shut, swollen from the spring rain. I started to open it, but she stopped me and pointed toward Daniel's bed. Her hand trembled. She looked scared. Then she vanished before I could speak. By then, I was scared too. When summer came, my family planned the annual 4th of July gathering. Though we were in Canada, it had become a family habit from the old days. Everyone came to our big house near the river. The air was warm, the fields quiet except for the hum of insects. On July 3rd, I woke again in the middle of the night to Clara's voice in my mind. She was standing by my bed, glowing faintly in the moonlight that slipped through the curtains. Her hand was cold when she took mine, but I followed her anyway. This time the guest room window was already open. Mom had aired out the rooms earlier that day. Clara climbed onto the roof, her feet making no sound. She turned to me, eyes wet, and waited. I followed, heart hammering. We stood near the edge. She pointed down at the exact place where her head had struck the tiles. The moonlight made the stones shimmer like ice. Then she gripped my arm tightly, closed her eyes, and waved her hand in front of her face. The world twisted. Suddenly I wasn't me. I was her. I was her. I felt the cold air rush through my hair as I dropped blue rose petals from the roof, spelling a word I didn't fully understand. Why? I heard a shout, a boy's voice, Daniel's. He ran toward me, angry, his face twisted. I felt his hands shove my back. Then the sky flipped. My skull hit the stone, a loud crack like breaking ice. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the roof in my own body. Clara's hand slipped away as she disappeared into the wind. The next day, families arrived for the reunion. I watched Daniel avoid everyone's eyes. Later, I saw him staring at the roof, pale and silent. That evening, when the others were swimming in the pond, I told him to come in too. I told him I'd be his swimming buddy. He hesitated but followed me. The water was dark and cold. The others left the pond, laughing as they went back to the fire pit. We were alone. I swam out farther, into the deep part, the reeds thick around us. He looked nervous. I teased him, told him he couldn't catch me. He followed. When he got close, I grabbed him, shoved him under. He thrashed, clawed, tried to surface, but I was stronger. I whispered, "This is for Clara." When I ran back to the yard, gasping, I screamed that Daniel had gone under. Everyone believed me. The search went on till nightfall. They said it was another accident. Years passed, decades. The old house still stands on the edge of Selkirk, weathered and empty. I moved away, tried to forget, but last night I saw her again for the 5th and final time. I'm old now, my hands spotted, my breath short. I've been feeling a lump under my arm for weeks, blood in the sink, weight slipping away. I know what it means. It was 2:17 a.m. when I woke to a chill in the room. Clara stood by my bed looking just the same as before, young, untouched by time. She smiled, that crooked little grin she used to wear after a prank. Without words, she reached out her hand. This time I didn't hesitate. We walked the dark hallway together, her bare feet silent against the wood. The house groaned with the weight of years. She led me to the same guest room. The window was already open, snow blowing softly inside. The moonlight painted the roof silver. When I stepped onto the roof, I didn't feel the cold. Clara walked beside me to the edge, and we both looked down at the stone path below. The snow had melted there, exposing a patch of gray tile. She turned to me, lifted a single blue rose petal, and placed it in my hand. Then she kissed my cheek, and for the first time since she died, she whispered, not in my mind, but in the air, or even now. I smiled. My heart felt light. I leaned back, the wind rushing past me, the sky spinning, the ground rising fast. As I fell, I saw flashes of us, laughing, swimming, chasing our old dog through the fields, blowing out candles, sharing secrets under the stars. I saw everything we were before death changed it all. Then I hit the stone, and the world went quiet. They'll find me there, maybe by dawn, lying on the same spot where she fell 70 years ago. The blue petal will still be in my hand. The townspeople will whisper about the curse of the old house on River Road. Some kids will sneak there in winter nights, daring each other to climb the roof. Maybe one of them will see her. See us standing together in the snow, smiling that foolish little half smile that means it's all beginning again. The wind will howl through Selkirk, carrying our laughter down the frozen streets, past the shuttered shops and the silent church. And if you ever drive through that town on a Manitoba winter night, when the fog curls low and your headlights catch something pale on the side of the road, don't stop. Don't look twice, because some ghosts never rest. They only wait. They only wait